because there's just so much I could say about the breath. It's really one of my favorite subjects. It's one of my favorite things to explore as an Alexander student and as a teacher. And maybe you really love breathing too. You might not really like it very much if you have a history of problems or breathing difficulties. Or maybe you just don't think about the breath very much. It's something we take for granted because it is an automatic thing that happens constantly. And so a lot of us don't pay much attention to our breath at all unless we get a cold or there's a problem. Um, you might have a relationship with your own breathing because of activities you do, like some athletics, like swimming, running. Or maybe you do something like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong that has a particular way of breathing that partners with those types of movements. In fact, we're going to do a little movement and breathing later today that's rooted in some Qigong practice. And so those are particular ways of breathing. And so you might be aware of your breath if you engage in those kinds of activities. Um, from an Alexander point of view, we're interested in seeing what is normal, healthy breathing. And if you walk away today with no other new information, I hope you will have learned something about what's actually going on in your body when it's breathing. We're going to cover some anatomy and some of the mechanics of breathing to increase our awareness, both on a factual level, but also on an experiential level. We'll take a little look at ways that we're breathing, ways that are pretty common that we interfere with healthy breathing, and then ways that we might be able to support better breathing in ourselves. If there's time at the end, I'll introduce some things that you could do, some ways that you could breathe to deal with depression, anxiety, psychological issues, but I'm not sure we're going to have time for that today. So, because I'm more interested in movement and the breath. And so, for those of you who are very familiar with the Alexander technique, some of the anatomical and mechanical information will be review, and I hope you enjoy the review. But a lot of you may not know exactly what's going on in the body when it's breathing. And it's really important, I feel, to know some of the basics of the movement, which is why I call this breathing is movement. Because then we can better cooperate with what our bodies are trying to do. So that's just a small slice. I'm not going to go into a whole long lecture on the anatomy of breathing, but we'll get a chance to kind of look at a little bit of the map of the equipment for breathing, and then we'll watch part of a video that shows what the movement of all these parts looks like. Again, I'll just say one more time, if you want more information, resources about breathing after today, please put your name and email in the chat before we go. So now, before I actually get into the anatomy, just again to kind of reiterate why this is an important part of Alexander work. It actually formed the core, one of the core things that F.M. Alexander discovered. As many of you must know, this all began in the late 19th century with Frederick Matthias Alexander, who was an actor who kept losing his voice. And that's essentially a respiration problem. And so when he began to discover what he had been doing in performance that was causing this chronic hoarseness, he discovered a lot about normal breathing and the psychophysical aspects of breathing. So much so that when he started to share his discoveries, most of the people that were referred to him also had respiratory issues, and he started to be known as the breathing man or the breathing method man. And so breathing is really one of the earliest habit patterns that that we deal with when we're looking at what we're doing to get in our own way and cause ourselves more tension and stress than we really need to. So what's actually going on in the body? I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you. This first one is titled the respiratory system, but it's not the whole respiratory system at all. One fun fact that I really like is that the skin itself is part of our respiration, with all the pores of the skin. That's part of how the gases in the body come and go. So that's usually kind of ignored in pictures and diagrams, but this kind of gives you the basics. One thing I'll say, and we'll learn this when we watch the video, is that both of the lobes of the lungs here are pictured as though they're equal in size, but actually the left side of your lungs, the left lobe, is a little bit smaller than the right because there's a heart nestled in here. So your left lung's a little bit smaller. But this is essentially where the lungs are placed. They actually come up a little higher than this picture shows. They come up, if this is the collarbone, they actually come up slightly higher than that. This is the diaphragm, and it too is kind of irregularly shaped. And then the ribs here are cut away. This is your basic thoracic cavity. And then, of course, there's the sinuses, the mouth, the nose, the larynx, trachea, and this is kind of what you might see, you know, in a basic anatomy book or on your doctor's office wall. This shows how respiration is connected to the nervous system. So this right here, this yellow tube-like thing, is the phrenic nerve, and as you can see, it inserts into the diaphragm and spreads out. The phrenic nerve is the nerve that actually triggers breathing. The nerve triggers the diaphragm to begin an inhalation, and it goes up into the cervical spine, the neck part of your body. And as you probably know, or maybe are just starting to learn if you're new to the AT, Alexander's one of his primary discoveries was that the balance of the head at the top of the spine, the neck-head relationship, is incredibly important. So if this is all being squished, it's putting a lot of pressure, and that's going to affect the way you breathe. And the way you breathe can free up neck tension, but we'll get to that. So I'm just showing this briefly to remind us that the nervous system and the respiratory system are interdependent. And the way we breathe really affects our nervous system, and changes in the nervous system are reflected in the way we breathe. This is a drawing of the vagus nerve, which actually we don't have time to go into detail, but just looking at the drawing on the right, the vagus nerve kind of goes throughout the whole body, and it is in charge of the autonomic nervous system, which is connected to stress, tension, relaxation, digestion, and it's a beautiful forest of nerves. Right in here is about the level of the diaphragm. So the phrenic nerve is there, and then the vagus nerve connects also to there. And then a lot of it is here in what would be the abdomen, the intestinal system, because we have more nerve endings in our intestine than we do in our brain, actually. Oops. Okay, so we'll stop sharing. That was just very quickly, again, to remind us that when we breathe, we're really connecting to the nervous system. The nervous system is affected. The way we think affects the way we feel, and the way we feel affects the way we breathe. So it's really all very interdependent. But those are kind of some two-dimensional views. And now I would like to share part of a wonderful video made by an Alexander teacher, Jessica Wolf, who has provided us with an animated view of what moves in the body when we're breathing. So I'm going to share that next. We'll just watch the first few minutes of it, not the whole thing, but that way you can kind of see from a three-dimensional point of view what's going on the inside. And I may pause it at certain points to just emphasize some of what we're seeing.
Breathing.
I just want to say before we go any farther, if you've seen this before, see if you can find some new information or something that you're happy to be reminded about. And for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, just note what is kind of surprising or maybe that you didn't know.
Is movement. The motion of the spine and the springy mobility of the ribs are crucial to efficient breathing. The spine serves as both a support structure and a mobile column. It makes subtle changes on each inhalation and exhalation.
Again, I'm just going to pause this to point out the angle of the ribs here. They attach to the sides of the spine in back and wrap around and meet in front, most of them. There's a few at the bottom that don't come all the way around. But just notice this downward slant of the ribs. This is different than we really see a lot of times in drawings or like Halloween skeletons, or I even have a skeleton model from a medical school where the ribs are parallel to the ground. They're lifted up, and most people don't realize that there is this kind of downward slant of the ribs. And when we get into standing and movement, this will be important information to have.
The ribs connect to and articulate around the spine. We have 24 ribs, 12 on each side, and because of their flexibility, multiple directions of movement are possible. You are now seeing the diaphragm, the primary muscle of respiration. The diaphragm separates the thorax from the abdominal cavity. It is a large muscle with a fibrous center called the central tendon. The two long muscle fibers inserting into the upper lumbar vertebrae are the crura, commonly referred to as pillars. Fibers spread from the dome-like shape of the central tendon and attach to the circumference of all the lower ribs. The excursion of the diaphragm is along the vertical dimension of the torso, descending on the inhalation and ascending high up on the exhalation.
Okay, I just want to say that again because we're going to be playing with this. When you breathe in, your diaphragm flattens and descends down toward your pelvic floor. And when you exhale, it rises back up again. So there's upward motion on the out-breath and a kind of flattening and spreading out as you breathe in.
An optimally functioning diaphragm might rise as high as T5, the fifth thoracic vertebrae. Looking up from below, we see the floor of the diaphragm in motion. It is thin and supple and irregularly shaped, with more muscle fiber in the back than at the front. There are 3 tubes connecting to the thoracic cavity and to the abdominal cavity: the descending aorta, the vena cava, and the esophagus. Our lungs are housed in our upper ribs. This is where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. Most people don't realize the top of the lung extends up behind the collarbone, while the base of the lung touches the diaphragm. The lungs are not symmetrical. The right lung is larger than the left. Contrary to what is often thought, there is more lung tissue in the back than the front. The shoulder blades lie over the ribs and can be thought of as protective shields for the lungs. In order for the breath to move with ease, the scapula must be able to glide smoothly.
So this is another habit that shows up a lot in many of us, which is that the scapula, the shoulder blades, kind of get fixed on the back of the ribs and don't move with the movement of breathing. And that makes actually moving arms and hands much harder. And, you know, most of us carry excess tension in our upper backs here. So one way of freeing up your scapula is to begin to free up your breathing, and vice versa.
Behind the sternum is the trachea, a pipe-shaped structure about 4 inches long. It divides into bronchi, which branch into bronchioles. These form the airway for the respiratory system.
Okay. We could go on. There's a lot more information in this video, and again, if you're interested, there'll be a link to Jessica's website in the resource sheet that I'm sending out to anybody who wants it. And if you would like to get the whole video, I encourage you to do so. It's really, I find it really helpful to understand this movement that's going on inside, to be able to see it like that instead of just in a picture in a book. We're going to explore that movement together in a few minutes, but I'd like to just pause here now and invite anybody who would like to see, I'm going to go back to gallery view, to share something that surprised you, something you didn't know about the anatomy or the movement in breathing. And if you could use the reactions, you know, the actual, like, raise your hand, and I will try to see if I can find you. So there's enough of you that I wouldn't be able to see your hands raised. So if you can click on the raise your hand reaction, like that. Yes, Benita, you'll have to unmute yourself. What surprised you?
There was so much breathing in the back.
That there's so much breathing in the back. Yes, that's often a surprise to people. We're really oriented to the front side of the body. Maybe you notice your chest moving or your belly, but we don't think about the sides and the back. Joy.
Yeah, that, you know, I've had a lot of Alexander technique lessons, and I was even in teacher training for 1 year. And breathing was so glossed over. So this is a thrill. I didn't know that there was so much, that there's more lung and breathing in the back also. I also didn't realize how the lungs are taller than the collarbone. And I guess I would have known it if I thought about it, but I love knowing that the scapula, it keeps moving, with our breath. And I love knowing that. So this is all like brand new to me. I'm so thrilled. Thank you.
Great. Oh, I'm thrilled for you. Yes. I mean, I always laugh when Jessica says, contrary to popular belief, there's more um, lung tissue in the back than in the front. I'm sure I never thought about that myself, but it's good to know, and it makes sense actually. And the information about the scapula, the shoulder blades, is really crucial to just be able to hold that in mind when we're breathing. And we'll do that in a minute or so, because if your shoulder blades and collarbones, if your shoulder girdle can move with your breath, your arms and hands are much freer, which we'll see. Oh, and somebody is saying what surprised them in the chat. They wrote it in the chat. What surprised them was all the bones moving. Yeah, the ribs really have, under the best conditions, they really move out, lift up, and then settle back down again, all the way around, three-dimensionally. Anybody else have a surprising, like, oh, I had no idea, or something that you maybe knew but are curious about working with or understanding more? Let me just check the chat. Oh, always good to be reminded of how much cartilage there is. Yes, thank you. And more about free scapulas. Yes, good. In the picture, let's see if I can go back just quickly. Yeah, just looking at this picture, what's blue here is cartilage. This is something that I found really important when I learned it. Is that, yeah, it's hard, hard bone, and then it gradually, it's not this abrupt, but it gradually changes to cartilage. Very tough cartilage that feels hard, but the cartilage is in front. This little triangular bone here is called the xiphoid process, and that's mostly cartilage at the base of your sternum, right at the solar plexus. So we're actually softer in the front of our rib cage than we are. We have a sort of softer front than back. And this comes in really handy if you're a woman who's pregnant. As your abdomen grows, it's good that your ribs are a little bit softer and flexible and can, move out of the way of your growing belly. But this is true for both male and female anatomy. It's not just for women. Well, so understanding this, we can get it from this animated video, for which I'm very grateful, and all the books and pictures we can look at. But one of the best ways is to get this movement in is to actually move with our breath. So that's what I would like to do next. And I'm going to put the view back to me and actually turn my video off for a moment, because I'm going to invite us to stand. You don't have to stand up for this next part, but I'm going to. And so to get the long shot, I have to move my camera a little bit. So be patient for a moment while I do that. And let's see what we can get here, what this looks like. Okay, so I do want to move back a bit to stand. And so if you'd like to come to your feet, you can, but what we're going to do, you can also stay seated for. So again, just take a moment now to sort of just tune into the fact that your body's breathing. You don't have to breathe in any particular way. Just bring some attention to the movement that you can feel, the sensations of the breath dropping in and dropping out. And you might just notice where it's easiest to feel the breath coming and going. It could be like right up here at the shoulders or the chest, could be in your belly. It might be the airflow through your nostrils and the back of your throat. Just where is it easiest to connect your attention to the sensations of the breath coming and going. Good. So now we're going to try to mimic what the diaphragm is doing as you're breathing. So make a little dome with your hands, interlace your fingers and make a little dome here. And imagine that this dome is your diaphragm. As you saw from the video, it's not exactly shaped like this. It's got more than one it's got two domes kind of on the sides. It's shaped irregularly, but this is as close as we can come. And then your forearms out to your elbows could be the ribs, right? Your rib cage. So what we can do is breathing in, flatten that dome down toward your pelvis and notice how your elbows and your arms lift on the inhale. And then as you exhale, it rises back up. So you can do this by directing your breath. If you'd like to take in a full breath, you can do that. Breathe in and out. Or you can follow your own natural breathing. It's hard to coordinate for some of us at first, so it might be easiest to choose to breathe in and out. Then pause for a moment. And if you haven't been following your own organic natural breath, see if you can start doing that. So when you feel your body breathing in, flatten the dome, lift the ribs, and then as your body exhales, noticing that you're breathing in and there's an expansion, breathing out and there's a rising up. Right? Knowing that the diaphragm on the out breath is rising up, back up into the rib cage. Let's just do this one more time. Good. Let your arms just come to rest for a moment. And we can actually feel this by touching our own bodies. So let's start with sort of the obvious one. Maybe put a hand right on your chest and maybe your another hand at the back, like the back of your hand, wherever it can comfortably reach your back. And taking a full breath, let it go. Maybe a couple more full breaths. Feel the movement of your ribs. Good. And then now kind of leave your breath alone and see if you can feel the movement. It may be a little quieter, a little subtler, but can you feel movement in the back and front both? Good. Another place you can feel the breath might be at your shoulders. So you could place your fingertips right here on the tops of your shoulders. There might be a little rise. Maybe not. The breath can be very quiet and almost imperceptible. or it can be really a big feeling. So if you don't feel anything moving up here, don't worry. You still know you're breathing, right? Good. And then maybe the sides of the ribs. This is pretty easy to feel. We don't really pay attention to the sides of the ribs that much unless they're hurting or something. There's definitely movement here. And then lastly, you can feel the movement of the breath in the abdomen. You know, maybe put a hand right at your solar plexus, right at the base of the sternum, the breastbone, and then maybe right in the middle of the abdomen. And you can probably feel some movement here, especially on the inhale. Expanding as you breathe in, letting go as you breathe out. I just want to say something about what's called belly breathing, because a number of people for various reasons over the years have been told that they should be doing belly breathing. And I'm not quite sure what these instructions are supposed to mean, but I've worked with enough people who have been confused about this to know that it's not a very helpful idea. So just so you know, your abdominal muscles are moving out when you inhale because your diaphragm is moving down toward your pelvic floor at the groin. So they're sort of kindly expanding, getting out of the way for the descent of the diaphragm. You're not actually breathing into your belly. That would not be a good thing, actually. And the diaphragm is the sort of barrier between the thoracic cavity and the gut. So yes, we can feel this expansion here, especially when we're deep breathing, and that can be a good thing. But to just make sure that you don't think you're breathing into your belly. Some people actually do have that idea. So there's all this movement happening on the inside. So what gets in the way of this? What are the things that we do that restrict our breathing? Now, I want to just say, before I get into the actual sort of ways we hold ourselves or shapes we get ourselves into that make breathing harder for the body, that the breathing, as I said earlier, is intimately connected to the nervous system. And so depending on what's happening, in any given moment, your breathing's going to change. And so if you are suddenly startled by a loud noise, you're probably going to hold your breath. You're going to tense up and you're going to hold your breath. If you're late for an appointment and you're stuck in a traffic jam, your breathing's going to change. Under stress, if someone's yelling at you, or even if you're really excited and happy, lots of different factors are going to change how we breathe. And the breath can be a great indicator of how we're feeling and what we're doing. So it's not that the breath is supposed to stay the same balanced, steady rhythm all the time, no matter what. But there are some ways that we tend to hold our bodies that make breathing more difficult. And you may know some of your habits. One of the most common ones is, when I'm just standing from the side so you can see more easily, when people tend to slump, right? Either sitting or standing. We tend to pull down. And so go ahead, either sitting in your chair or standing. If you're standing, let yourself kind of slump. Don't, do the thing you're not supposed to do. Just go ahead and pull down and have kind of lousy posture and get heavy and pull down on yourself. And now try taking in a full breath. You can see that where I'm folding, and you can probably feel on yourself that this kind of downward pull is folding right at where the diaphragm and the base of the ribs most would like to be able to expand. And so what that means is you're not getting a full breath, or your system's working really hard to breathe in. So then what happens, this is a classic Alexander dilemma or postural dilemma that people often say, okay, I know I slump, but then I try to stand up straight, and they do this stand up straight thing where they lift their chest and arch the back. And if you're standing and doing this, you're probably tightening your thighs and knees as well. And I'm really exaggerating this, but this isn't too far off from how a lot of people were taught to stand, quote unquote, stand up straight. So if you do this, you know, try sitting or standing with this kind of overarched arrangement of parts. You can even hear in my voice what's happening. Right back here, under the scapula, the back of the diaphragm, the back is narrowed. And my head is pulling down on my neck, my shoulders are lifted, and it's harder even to move my arms. And so if you even have a slight version of that, I was demonstrating a really huge version of that, but a lot of people stand at attention like this, and everything's pulling up here rather than widening the back, freeing the neck, widening the back. And this is exactly what happened for Alexander. It's a lot of what he was doing. It sounds like really pulling everything back, and then, you know, putting a big strain on your voice. You can't breathe, you can barely swallow. So we do a lot of things that throw us off balance. A lot of people, this was me, I always stood with all the weight on my left leg. Sorry, it's so dark you can't really see. But you may stand with most of your weight on one leg or the other, which puts your body in a twist. And that twist is going to make it harder for all the internal muscles, the intercostal muscles around your ribs, your diaphragm, to move freely. Along with all the other things that does that hurts the body, some of these patterns of holding are really restricting how we breathe. And then the last one, which is not so much about a postural thing of how people hold their bodies, but probably one of the most common ways that people over effort in breathing is pushing air out on the exhale. So when we first started and did those 3 mindful breaths, and we're going to be doing some more breathing in a moment, you may have noticed as you exhaled, maybe you were pushing it out. Rather than just letting the air flow out. So you might check in with yourself and see, is it possible to just let the air drop in and then leave? You don't really need to push from the diaphragm. If you were doing something, I'm not gonna comment on singing because I'm not confident that what I was about to say is true. There are ways of singing, speaking, obviously certain types of breathing for athletics that have to be a certain way. But I would say that to push air out on the exhale is under almost every circumstance is not necessary or helpful, especially if you're just sitting at your desk, you know, watching a webinar. So notice how if you're adding just a little extra effort to that exhale. And then the flip side of that, of course, is shallow breathing, where people aren't actually exhaling much at all. If you're only taking air in and not really letting it out all the way, you're restricting the space actually in the lobes of your lungs for oxygen to come in and CO2 to come out. And so some people are really only breathing up here, and they don't really have a lot of movement and freedom in their diaphragm and their abdomen. So those are some of the things that I've noticed in the people that I work with and in myself. And one of the things that I love most about knowing that breathing is movement is learning to partner breathing with movement. So I want to try a little experiment with you. And if there's time, I don't know if there's going to be time to really do much of this, but we'll try a couple of different movements where we're going to partner breathing in and out with moving. So again, you could stand or you could do this sitting. And a couple of these things come from the world of Qigong. And Qigong, if you're not familiar with that, is Qi means energy and Gong means cultivation. So it's a it's a way of cultivating life energy. And it's a series of movements that pair breathing in and out with the movements. And so one of them, the first one in the form that I practice, is simply inhaling, lifting the hands and arms up to about shoulder height, exhaling, bring them back down again. So just try that very lightly on an in-breath. Breathe your hands up, exhale, let them come back down again. And this is normally done with long, slow breaths, but you can just follow your own natural breathing rhythm if you want to. The idea here is that we're really thinking about moving as we breathe and breathing as we move. And a helpful thought is expanding on the in-breath, rising up on the out-breath, because remember your diaphragm is rising back up inside as you exhale. So you might think up as you breathe out, even though your hands are coming down. There's an upward flow up your spine every time you breathe out. Another move that might make that easier and less sort of counterintuitive is we'll inhale, bring the hands away from each other. Exhale, bring them back down. So this is kind of what your ribs are doing as you breathe in, opening, expanding, breathing out. Yeah. Now we can actually do some kind of everyday movement, like moving from standing to sitting with the breath as well. So if you're sitting, I encourage you to just come to standing, just stand in front of your chair. And you can decide whether you want to breathe in or out as you sit in your chair. As you move to sitting, you can decide if you want to inhale and then exhale, or if you'd rather breathe out and come to the chair. You can just decide and play with it a little bit. And then moving from sitting to standing, do you want to breathe in or out? Now, there's a couple ways to go. What comes naturally to me is moving from standing to sitting. I want to breathe in. And then as I settle into the chair, breathe out. And the same thing, only in reverse, coming to standing. I kind of want to inhale to come up and finish with an out breath. But you can also do the whole thing on just one breath. So you could exhale into the chair, inhale to standing, whatever you want. Play with it a little bit. See what it's like to move from sitting to standing and standing to sitting. And partner your breathing. Make it a conscious choice. And I'll also add, if you're exhaling, see if you can also think up, because there's an upward flow as you breathe out. Good. Try that one more time. See what it's like to be aware of breathing in or out, whatever feels right to you as you move. Now, one other, let's see, I don't know where you can see this back here. One other thing that really interrupts free breathing is when we're lifting, bending, lifting, and reaching. I'm a short person. I have to reach overhead a lot in life. And I noticed, along with some of the other sort of lousy habits of reaching and tightening my neck, not wanting to do that, that if I really breathe as I reach for something, it helps with my extension. It also stops my habit of holding my breath when I'm reaching for something way up high. Again, you can hear it in my voice. Bending over to pick something up. Now, the stool is not actually very heavy, but when we bend over to pick something up, especially if there's some weight to it, we tend to hold our breath as we lift. So if you think about breathing as you come over to pick something up, do I want to be breathing out or in as I lift? Bringing that awareness to your movement can really be a game changer, so that you're not holding your breath, tightening right in here, and bringing more oxygen flow to your muscles, which is really a good idea. So you might actually notice, like I used to, even just to lift a coffee cup, had a little bit of just holding my breath slightly. Very weird, don't know why. I don't do that anymore, but even the slightest little thing can sometimes be where we interfere with our breathing. So we have about 5 minutes. I'm gonna readjust the camera. And once again, I'll just sort of open it up to anybody who has questions or comments. Looks like there's something in the chat. A question in the chat. What would I recommend for a student who plays the violin and holds their breath on harder passages? The first thing that comes to mind is when you practice, slow down when you hit the harder passages. And I don't know, a violin teacher or Alexander teachers here with more experience in violin or instrumental applications might have something different to say. But if it were me, I'd be like, well, if you're about to play a very difficult passage, slow down and play it slowly. And again, I'm not a violinist, but it seems like the movement of the bow might be able to match some rhythm of your breathing. Ariel, thank you. Have them sing the passage and then have them sing it as they play it. You have to be breathing if you're singing, right? Good advice. Thanks. Anybody else? There's lots of teachers here. Love to hear from anybody else. You can unmute yourself if you want to jump in. Rise and follow the breath, ribs. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Any other advice for the violinist? And then I'm going to share what Catherine just wrote. David, did you have something? Oh, good.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
yes.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Yes. That is a way that we practice difficult things, is to do them slowly so that each gesture becomes easy. And then there's also practicing just a very fast passage, just a small bit of it at the speed that you want to do it, but a little bit before you try to sustain it for a long period of time. But really, probably consciously breathing is necessary. If you tend to hold your breath, you might need to consciously counterbalance that particular habit.
Thank you. Someone else has said, often it is the thought of difficulty that causes the tension. Yeah, I was going to say something along these lines. Perhaps stop thinking of it as difficult would help a bit. If you can do that. When I used to jog, which I really don't anymore, I used to jog in a park that at the end of the 3-mile loop, there was a hill. And I mean, I could have gone the reverse way too, but I didn't. And when I got to that hill, I would run up the hill and sing quietly to myself, I love hills, I love hills, I love hills. It was hard, but I did sort of consciously do that. Maybe not so much think about it's not difficult, but more like I love difficult passages. I love playing hard stuff. It's fun to play hard passages. A whispered ah while playing, if you know what whispered ah is. If you don't, have an Alexander teacher show you. What is physically triggering the held breath? Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like, what is happening in your body when you hold your breath? Are you clenching your jaw? Are you pulling your ribs in? Are you arching your back? Are you shrugging your shoulders? What is happening? What's the tension that's making you hold your breath? All really, really helpful. Thank you for your kind words, people. We have to end because there's another session starting in 15 minutes, a constructive rest session, and I want you all to be free to do that if you want to. So if anybody wants to stay for 5 minutes, we could stay for 5 minutes, but I want to stop. I want to end by thanking you all for being here. It's so great to have everybody, so many people show up for this. Again, please put your contact information in the chat if you would like to receive a resource sheet, a list of further resources, and or be on my mailing list. And please come to the rest of the week. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the workshops all week long. And especially, I want to throw out an invitation to Saturday at 3 p.m. for our closing session, where most of the teachers who are presenting this week will be there to answer all your questions and hear back from you. It's going to be a really fun session on Saturday at 3, so I hope I'll see you all then. Thank you so much for coming. And constructive rest starts in 15 minutes, but I'll hang out for another 5 with anybody who wants to talk. Thanks so much. Nancy, you have your hand up. Were you waving goodbye or did you have a question? Okay.
Amy,
Yes.
In the meantime, remember to save the chat. So.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I've also saved it. But
Thank you
there's
so
more
much,
people.
Amy.
Good.
Yeah.
You had over 90 people at the highest point, so make sure Imogen gets that number.
Oh, thanks. Yes, I saw 86, so I'll say more than 90. Great. Thanks for tracking that for me. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
Amy, I had a question.
Yes.
Could you repeat what you were talking about with the lower belly breathing? I thought that was really helpful. That's the first time I think somebody said it. And I just want to make sure I heard it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just clarifying that because some of my students have come in with this, they've been given this instruction to practice belly breathing, and they actually think they're breathing into their abdomen. And I'm quite sure that's not what whoever told them to breathe like that meant. But the idea that you're sending air into your belly is just wrong. And so, first of all, factually, that's incorrect. But it also, what I've noticed in people who are practicing that is they're sort of adding tension to their abdominal muscles, like pushing their belly out when they're inhaling. What's happening, if you put your hand on your abdomen, you can feel it moving. Unless you're a very shallow breather, then you might not. But in normal respiration, we can feel an expansion. There's a little rise in the abdomen on the inhale. And then on the exhale, it drops back again. And the reason that's happening is that this diaphragm here is flattening, right? On the inhale, the ribs are expanding, the diaphragm moves down toward the pelvic floor, and so the abdominals expand to make room for the descending diaphragm. And so that's why they move.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
And I stopped the video before it got into looking at the psoas muscles. Do you know where the psoas is located in the body?
At one point I did.
They're hip flexors. So one end attaches on the inside of the thigh bone, and then they come through the hip joint and insert along the front of the lumbar spine. And they make sitting possible. And like if you're sitting and you can lift your knee, you're using your psoas. You're using other things too. But so these are, the core muscles that we're supposed to be strengthening, some of the core muscles. And they're actually involved in respiration too, in the sense that when the diaphragm comes back, tucks back up, and the ribs drop, there's an upward flow up the spine that lengthens this is under ideal conditions, that lengthens the psoas, the core muscles. But also what's happening is, Jessica was mentioning something called the crura, these tendons that go up vertically up along the spine, and they lengthen on the out breath too. So one time, a zillion years ago, when I was still a teacher trainee, I went to a workshop with, I can't remember who, but we were lying in child's pose or on our hands and knees on mats, and you could put your hand on the crown of somebody's head and feel on their exhale, if they were breathing well, the head would move against your hand, because there is this lengthening that happens on an exhale through the spine. It's really interesting. So when you exhale, think up, because that's literally what's happening. I mean, you can't really feel it, but that's okay.
Thank you so much. That's great. Really
Yeah,
helpful.
that was maybe too much.
No, not at all.
Okay. Anything else? Is there anything that somebody's like, no, I think that's wrong what you said? Because I'm always interested in finding out more.
No, but I have a question.
Okay.
You talked when you still had that video of the skeleton and the scapula, which are the shoulder blades. You said, and if how do the shoulder blades get stuck, and how do you know if they're stuck?
Well, they get stuck because of muscle tension, and this is going to sound like a circular thing to say, but lack of movement. So there's two basic muscle groups that cross over each other in what we think of as our upper back, the trapezius which goes up to the back of your head and goes down the back of your neck and is very wide. And then the rhomboids, which are rhomboid shaped, they cross over each other and they move in sort of different directions when they move. But they literally sometimes get stuck. This is what massage therapists call adhesions. They literally get stuck on each other. They're supposed to have this sort of lovely fluid that helps them glide back and forth, and mostly they do. But the weight of the bones of the scapula, I think sometimes just kind of gets stuck when we hold so much tension in those upper back muscles. And from an Alexander, a purely Alexander point of view, if this 10, 12 pounds of weight is pulling back on the back of my neck, because I've got this sort of, I'm pulling this weight back and down on my neck, then not only is my neck going to be tight, but my upper back's going to be tight too. And we're all kind of walking around in this startle reflex in one way. I'm exaggerating it right now, but most people are kind of stuck in that position, that arrangement of parts. And so, I mean, this is I don't know if this is very Alexandry, but one of my daily warm-ups is doing shoulder, like rolling my shoulders to kind of feel the scapula moving back there. Swimmers have pretty good, people who swim on a regular basis have pretty good movement in their shoulder blades. But just from holding tension, and then the compensation of, your head out of balance can also kind of pull things out of whack. So you can, yeah.
Amy, I'll just share something quickly. The violinist is probably gone, but what I like to do with a string player like that is to have the left hand be open. You can't see me probably. And be the violin. The right hand comes to it and is the bow. They're resting on each other as you're moving your whole body like a fish. So you simplify the motion by letting first your two hands rest on each other as you're sensing your whole beautiful movement through your head, spine, and body and connected to the space around you. It all becomes one. And then when you take the violin and the bow and you simply gently extend out, they're still resting on each other through the wood of the bow, through the wood and the string of the violin.
Lovely.
And that way you can simplify it and notice your breath and movement as one, and then add the complexity very simply, not the difficult parts. Just bringing the bow to the string and letting one sound come out is magnificent when that happens.
Yes, and as you're doing that, say, I love this difficult passage.
Yeah, but to slow down and make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. Good, helpful, thanks. That's just fun to do anyway, even though I don't play violin.
Oh yeah, it's fun to do for anything.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Karen. How
Hi.
are you? All the way from Scotland. Woo!
Yes, I used to be a nurse, and this hour has just blown my mind. I've learned so much more in this hour than I did many years ago when I was doing my training. You don't get any of this. It's just amazing what you're
That is
teaching.
amazing. I'm sorry to say that's not the first time I've heard that from nurses and doctors, but thanks for saying so. I'm glad this was, new information or a different way of looking at the information you might have already had.
Yes, thank you very much.
But you're not nursing anymore?
No.
Amy, do you have time for one more question?
I do.
I'm Glenn.
Hi, Glenn.
I was under the impression, and maybe I've gotten this wrong, that FM Alexander didn't really focus on breathing because he believed that good use would take care of it automatically.
That's true. So yes, so it was a little misleading what I said. People came to him for help with their breathing, and I imagine that what he did was help them with their overall good use. Yes, he was adamant about that. I've just been reading about it. I'd kind of forgotten this, or maybe I never even really knew that he didn't believe in breathing exercises or working directly with the breath in any way, but indirectly working with use, he believed would solve all breathing problems. So I work a little differently than that, but
Okay.
but yes, that's correct. He and I don't think he was wrong. I don't disagree with him about that. But I think as the technique has developed over generations, there's been some more learning about respiration. There's a number of American teachers who learned from a breathing expert, Dr. Carl Stow, which is why I learned a lot in my training, because my Alexander teacher was a student of Carl Stow's. And so I think it's kind of infused the work over the last couple of generations, looking more directly at some breathing. But like the whispered ah, for example, that was mentioned, I don't think Alexander would consider that a breathing exercise, even though it involves breathing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I wasn't arguing with you. I was just wanting to
Yeah.
clarify.
Oh, no. I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's important for people to know that ultimately this work really, that is the principle. One of the main principles of this work is that our systems already know how to function. We don't necessarily have to do things to it. It's really a process of elimination, really more than addition.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I gave you my email. I'll look forward to hearing from you afterward.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for being here today.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Any last thoughts or questions before I sign off?
Did you just say, you just said something I thought very essential, and I wanted to write it down, which is exactly what I think this is all about. Our systems know how to work, so we're letting go of interferences to allow our natural design to function beautifully. But I'm not sure exactly how you said that. A process of elimination rather than
Addition.
Addition, okay.
Yeah. We're not really adding anything. We're trying to eliminate what we don't want.
Exactly.
And at the same time, make choices that support that innate organically functioning thing. So there are some we do make choices that encourage better functioning. But it really isn't like, okay, if I just hold my body this way or do this, my body will be better. It's like the body's fine. It's like, what's getting in the way of that?
Oh, that's great. I like that. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, good. Yes, go do some constructive rest, everybody. And I'll hopefully see you Saturday at 3 for the closing. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Thank
Amy.
you so much, Amy.